Welcome to Growth with Portia, a weekly conversation for your personal and professional growth. Here is your host, Portia Booker.
Hey, listeners, welcome to Growth with Portia. I'm your host, Portia Booker, and yes, this is my real name. So, question for you: did you bring your curious mind today? If so, I don't want to keep you waiting. Let's dive in. This conversation is episode 1 in the part 3 series of honoring my beloved mother, Sharonne Lopez, who made her transition from Earth on July 7th, 2022. So today I am joined by a returning guest who is on a mission to help others heal and enrich their lives through the art of forgiveness. So welcome back to Grew Up Portia, the forgiveness expert herself, Miss Kyonna F. Brown. How you doing today, Kyonna?
Hey, Portia, I'm doing good. It's good to be back. It's good to be back. I'm doing great.
It's been 2 years, right, since you
Uh-huh.
come back on the show, and what a blessing, right? I always love to have returning guests come back on, watch their journey through the interwebs, and then connect again to really hone in on how did you go from more trials to triumph in your journey. And so, Kyonna, I always love to start off my conversations with gratitude. What are you grateful for today?
Oh wow. I'm grateful for every second. Every second that I get to still be one of God's beautiful creations on this earth. Every time I get to go, I call outside his living room. Every time I get to go out there and see the flowers, the trees, the birds, and the bees, I'm just happy to be enveloped by his greatness. So every second is what I'm giving gratitude for today.
I couldn't agree more, Kyonna, because we just don't know in the world that we live in how really time is short. I think last year I did a live video on Facebook in December where I said, if you take nothing else from my life, learn to budget your time like you do your money. Because you
Mm-hmm.
can't invest in everything, because reality wise, you invest in nothing.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
that ain't, that's for your friends, your business. I mean, Kyonna, you are a serial entrepreneur. So you run several different arenas. So you know about budgeting your time wisely.
Absolutely. One of the things that I like what you said is budgeting your time because, even though we may be great budgeters with our finances, and we may lose some, but there's always a way to tap into a different market, a different industry, or create something new and have a whole new stream of income. But the one thing we'll never have is another stream of life. We only get this one life. And so, just like people want to get their monetary needs in order, you got to get your life in order and realize that your life and its time is more important and valuable. I lost my grandmother in January and never would have thought, that it was happening, or, it literally was just out of the blue. She'll go to the hospital and then she comes home. But this time she went to the hospital, went to a facility, and out of all the people in the world, I got the call. My mom, she didn't answer for whatever reason. I'm not sure. Well, I know why, because God knew that I could handle, that situation. But yeah, I would have never thought the last time that we did a FaceTime because of COVID, I wasn't able to go into the hospital. But the last time we did a FaceTime, I would never thought that that was the last time that I would talk to my grandmother.
Oh, Kyonna, my condolences to you and your family. I trust me when I tell you I walked that path just like you with my mom. And it's almost hard for me to believe that it's only been 3 months since my mom made her transition. And some days it still seems as though I'm asking myself the same question. Is this really it?
Yeah.
Is she really gone? Am I really navigating a new normal of life without my main squeeze?
Yeah.
And some days it hits me, they say grief comes in waves, and some days to me it's like a Mike Tyson uppercut. I mean, to put it lightly. I mean, and I'm sure, Kyonna, it's the same for you. And I want to go back really quick to what you mentioned about we only have one life, and we tend to, in my opinion, prioritize things over what really brings us true joy and happiness. And so, Kyonna, for our listeners who are tuning in, what did it take for you to pivot in your mindset where you're like, I can't stay in this arena of the common prescriptive narrative of the American dream anymore, but I want to live a full life of joy, happiness, and all the things? What would you say it took for you to be able to pivot into that arena?
Wow. So for some of the listeners, you may not know who I am. Of course, she says I'm returning. So really quickly, it wasn't if some of you know the story of incarceration for me, believe it or not, I thought that was going to be a pivoting moment. But that was a moment where I was able to kind of look at where I wanted to be in life according to the world's paradigm. But honestly, I'm going to say it was COVID for me. It honestly was COVID for me. So I have a brick and mortar. It's called Pooch Styles Pet Grooming, where I am your premier pet care specialist. And I've had this business. I thank God this year I'm celebrating 10 years, which is awesome. And I want to give a shout out to all of the supporters in the DMV area. But during the pandemic, I really had time to just sit still and be quiet. And that's one of the things that, we haven't done, and then we were made to do it. And so it was different for me because a lot of people were like, oh, I feel like I'm on lockdown. No, I've been on lockdown. This is not lockdown. I know what lockdown feels like. It was a different kind of lockdown for me because being in jail was out. I couldn't go get the fresh air when I wanted to. And it was all based upon, what I was going to do when it was time for me to be released. Like how was I going to regain my life? But this time in the world's lockdown with the pandemic, it was looking at where I was in life and how I wanted to change things. Not how I wanted to make them new, but how I wanted to change them so that I could have more of a successful life. And one of the things that I did, which I am so glad that I did, was take Saturdays off, right? So much of my life in the business part of it, I have went above and beyond for my clientele. My husband was at the point where sometimes he'd be like, aren't you closed? Why are you answering the phone? Why are you texting people? Why, going back and forth? Because I felt like, I have to do everything that I have to do to keep these clients and keep the business and all these things. So I overextended myself, which I ended up overexerting myself. And during the time of lockdown, I said, you know what? Your son, at that time, I believe he's 10 now. So I believe he had just turned 8. And so at that time, I was like, this boy is growing up, and we started taking nature hikes and, just doing a lot of things. And I'm like, I want to be able to not end this with him. And so I made the ultimate decision. And it was a hard decision because being in business for over 10 years, you have your set clients that come in on the weekend that look forward to, you being there because you're always there, and so I had to make that decision. And it wasn't just me making a decision. There were some conversations that I had with my receptionist, with the clients. But at the end of the day, I had to realize that I won't be able to get this time back. And so I wanted to be present and be active in my presence as long as I could be. And so, those who couldn't handle it, I had some that said, oh, well, I can't do, this. And some people left. And then they came right back and they figured out how how to make it a possibility for them to come during the allotted time that I allotted to give myself to them. Not when they wanted me to be there, but when I said, okay, Kyonna, this is the time that you're going to give yourself to your clients and to your staff and, people like that. And even now today, I have the focus on my phone. For my iPhone users, I have my focus and it comes on at a certain time. You will not reach me. You cannot get me. That is my time. And so I've learned, during this time of stillness in the pandemic, of how to kind of have my time the way that I want to have it and not the way that the world says I should have it, because I should work, and I should be available all the time. But when are you available for yourself? We pour so much out till we become these empty vessels. Yes, I understand. I want to go to the graveyard empty. I want to be able to have fulfilled all of the prophecy that God has for my life. But at the end of the day, I don't want to be empty because I'm drained, because I kept doing things that were not supposed to be in my wheelhouse in the beginning. So yeah, that's where I made the shift in my life.
One, Kyonna, kudos to you for business for 10 years. I mean, how many people who have been in the entrepreneurial space can say that they've achieved that milestone without contemplating folding, yet alone a brick and mortar? I mean, because a lot of businesses sprung up through COVID, right? A lot of digital transactions. So again, kudos to you. And I want to go back to another thing you said. You honored your time. I mean, yeah, it might have hurt, like you said, a little bit financially by stripping away that Saturday, but I think that in itself is an investment in you, in your own well-being. And I don't think people often realize that you're human. As a business owner, you're still human. You still have a family. I mean, you brought it up about like your husband, like, hey, aren't you closed? Why are you still answering that phone? And we had dinner. And then your son. I mean, you have a 10-year-old now who you want to be fully present and not absent in your presence, whether it's mentally, spiritually, financially, because you're depleted from overexertion. So I commend that, Kyonna. And I think so many entrepreneurs need to hear that and realize that taking time off is a business decision for your best interest. Because if you want to show up the best for your clients, you have to rest. And rest doesn't always mean sleep. Like you said, putting on the focus. I have to do that because I have squirrel attention span, but that's for a whole nother day. I'm not going to get on the whole squirrel span that Portia has. So we're going to take our first quick break right here on Group Portia. Everybody stick with us. We will be right back. Everybody, welcome back right here on Group Portia. I'm Joe Remotely with your forgiveness expert, Miss Kyonna F. Brown, and we were just having a great conversation, of course, about the importance of being fully present and really setting those boundaries as an entrepreneur. Kyonna, during our last conversation in 2020, we talked about the forgiveness of our friends, of our family, of our employers. I know a lot of people have kind of issues with that, including ourselves, right? And let's be honest, when we're in the grief process, people might find it difficult to forgive, especially if they are people of faith, believers. Forgive God for removing either a person from their life or an event. Your job lays you off, or that relationship that was rocky in the beginning that you shouldn't have been in. The situationship comes to an end. All of that. And so, Kyonna, for our listeners who are tuning in, Can you elaborate on how can people, when they're in that boat of grief, learn to forgive God and realize that God really did them a favor?
Wow. So not okay. This past year, 2022, I lost my grandmother in January. Now, in 2021, I lost my other grandmother in February. And so between February 2021, I took the class, I think it maybe started in September of 2021. There's a grief share class, and it's biblically based. And even though time had passed, I had a friend who had lost her son. And so she was taking a class. And so, here I am, I don't think that I'm grieving over my grandmother. I don't see myself going through, some motions like I've seen her go through. So I said, well, I'm just going to take this class with you for more support. But honey, when I got in the class, I said, girl, you are grieving. You are going through some things. And so it was a group setting, and it really taught me a lot about myself, the relationship with her, and really how I honored God in that. And whereas though I had other people that were around me who, sometimes were angry, that their loved one, was gone, and wondering why God took them. And even in instances where their family members were sick, why didn't you heal them? Why didn't you make it better? And so I've learned that we go through a series of challenges and difficulties in our life, but they're all for the growing. And if we get to the space of understanding that everything that we go through, we grow through, then we'll be able to, I'm not going to say grieve less, because it hits you different. Just like a moment ago, we were talking about my grandmother. I had an excellent day today. And just having the memory of, it all came back that moment, and so I honestly welled up a little bit, and so you never know when the grief is going to hit you, but just knowing that there's growth there that can be had. And so I look at, just the simple thing of talking with my grandmother and knowing that she's not here, but I remember everything that she taught me. I remember how strong she was. I remember the foundation that she built. I mean, she was the grandmother that recently passed. She was the oldest of 10. She came from a city in Virginia that, wasn't really well known, and she made it up to DC. By the time she passed, she had 3 properties. We were going through her items. She got this award for perfect attendance at work, where she had all of these monetary awards, because she said she was going to always go to work, which to me means that she always showed up. And so if that hadn't have happened or transpired, and I wouldn't have gone through those things, there wouldn't have been a growing lesson for me to know, that even though I go through things in life, I still got to show up. You still got to show up. You still got to be present. And so there's a growing in that. And so you learn to take what hurts and turn it into strength, because the hurt can be something that's downing you, but the strength is something that helps you prevail. And so you can turn that upside down. If somebody has a strong personality, some people it may be defending, but some people it might seem like it's powerful, like they're unshakable. Things, they won't shift, with things about yourself, learning about the strengths of the person will allow for the pain to be lessened, because you want to remind yourself of how great that person was, and not even just how great they were, but how much they impacted your life. And that even though they may not be here, They left a part of themselves here. And so in leaving a part of themselves here, what do we have to do? We have to honor that. And so how we honor that is being the individual that even if you're going through, you pray through it, you press through, you still show up. Even if you're going through it, you stand up and be that voice when somebody else is muted. You still have to be that light and be that presence, and always do it in the memory of them. Always do it. When you're doing things, like if I'm sitting here sulking, is my grandmother going to be proud of me? If I'm sitting here complaining, is my grandmother going to be proud of me? So in my actions, I've learned that in my grief, I can turn my pain into strength. And so instead of blaming God, I just thank God that I was able to be a witness of all of the greatness that was inside of that person. And then they gave a piece to me. I just look at the beginning and the creation of earth. God did something amazing. He pointed to he pointed to the firmament and in the air and said, here's the sky. He pointed to the ground or the lower and the firmament of the, and said, here's the sea. Then he said, all the creatures, he just pointed. But then when it got to the point of him making us, he went to himself. Right? And so all of the greatness that he is, he made us in that image. And now as a descendant, our parents and those who passed, they're all descendants of him. And so ultimately we're all connected to a greatness. And so to remember that in your pain, that yes, I am feeling this way. Yes, I am feeling low. But at the end of the day, there is still greatness to be had.
Oh, hands down. Hands down. Can I give a standing ovation? I feel like I just left from a great TED Talk. Like, seriously, Kyonna, you were spot on about really finding that gratitude within the legacy that your loved one instilled within you. And like you said, you got to show up even on the tough days and learn to channel your pain into purpose or your pain into some type of power, because we know that our loved ones want us to still live. Yes. Right. But I think oftentimes when a relationship ends, a loved one makes their transition, a job falls through, we fall into that boat of death unintentionally because we stop living because we were so fixated on this person, this place, this event. But really, when we think about it, things work out in our best interest, right? If we really look at things from the lens of opportunity. When one door closes, other ones open. And I think grief is that window of opportunity where, yes, this person has transitioned. I mean, you hit on about somebody being sick. That was the pain point with my mother. My mother had been sick a long time, and she, truthfully, honestly, she wasn't herself anymore. She wasn't able to be the jovial, person who she was, the party goer, the one to keep everybody laughing and all that. She no longer had that because her focus had went on all the things going wrong with her. So truthfully, in that sense, it was hard for me as her caregiver to watch her decline. And once she made her transition, there was a weight lifted off of me because she's no longer suffering. No more back and forth doctor's appointments. No more having to take 10,000 prescriptions a day, probably in a week's time. So, and then her probably feeling as my parent, like, wow, I'm really holding my kid back.
Yeah.
So, we have to think of the positives in that, right?
Absolutely.
And Kyonna, I got to ask this, as a woman of faith, we tend to sometimes, some people do, teeter on the fence with their faith where they tend to run away instead of turning to God, like what you did in these moments of grief. And so, Kyonna, for our listeners who are tuning in, if they're on that fence where they want to steer away, like you said, they're unable to really see kind of the blessing within the grief process, what words of wisdom can you leave with them?
Wow. So what I would say is one day at a time. literally one day at a time. And, you know, to even lessen it, sometimes it's 1 minute at a time, and be gracious with yourself, right? God gives us grace no matter what we do, but we tend to beat ourselves up. I mean, we literally take the whip, and I mean, we're hitting in our own selves, but God gives us grace no matter what we do. So we have to learn to give our own selves grace and realize that, you know, we don't have to have a bad day. You know, the moment may come, but we don't have to live in the moment. And I think that's something that we often do. We tend to live in the moment. And I've learned to get out of the moment so that it does not envelop my day. Right. So after you and have your moment, right? Don't suppress it, have it, let it out. Because when you keep it in, you're harboring pain, you're harboring hurt. And then what, you know, all you're doing is building a ticking time bomb, and you're going to explode if you do not let it out. Whatever it is that you have to do, and even if at that moment I'm not at one for cursing, but if that's what you got to do, then repent after it and keep it moving. You know, you got to do what you got to do. You know, at the end of the day, we're flesh, right? But the spirit is connected to us, and so we have, like I said, grace. And God knows our heart. He knows what we're dealing with. He knows how we're feeling. But we got to remember who lives inside of us. You know, if you're a believer, you know that you have the strength. Like, we are strong warriors. We can prevail anything. He makes us so powerful, but yet we dim our own light. So go out and be great. Have your moment. But remember, it's minute by minute, second by second, day by day, and take it as it comes. And when you go through those things, try to have a realization of what's going on at that opportune time, at that time that things are going on and you have that moment. Try to look for trigger points, you know, things that you know are going to set you off. And that's one of the things that forgiveness does. If you've forgiven in an area, true forgiveness, it doesn't come to you, you know, that you've let that thing go all the time. But when there are things that resemble the hurt, then, you know, you'll be reminded, right? You'll have that reminder, and that's like a alarm clock or a stoplight to say, hey, wait a minute, we're going into this place again. We healed from this, so we're not going to go back there again. Alert, alert, alert. Like, your body, your mind does this thing to your body where it wakens everything back up. And so when you're going through those moments where you're having grief, kind of pay attention to your surroundings so that you know, hey, like, if I keep riding down this street, you know, I'm gonna bust out and start crying. Or if I keep, you know, going to this place, or if, you know, mom's my screensaver, grandma's my screensaver, and I know that every time I pick up my phone, it's just like, oh, running well. You know, try to pay attention to those things, and not to say remove them totally, but put them in their place. You know, try to avoid things that will and that will limit your healing process, right, so to speak. So yeah, that's what I would say on that.
Oh, I couldn't agree more, Kyonna. I mean, you were spot on about noticing where you are, really being present again in your environment, in your thoughts, recognizing what those triggers are. Because if you understand your triggers and you know them, then you're able to really address them accordingly while you're in that moment. Mm-hmm. So we're going to take another quick break right here on Group Portia. Everybody, stick with us. We will be right back. Everybody, welcome back right here on Group Portia. I'm joined remotely with your forgiveness expert, Miss Kyonna F. Brown. And we were just having a great conversation, of course, continued on learning the art of forgiveness and recognizing your triggers. And so, Kyonna, if our listeners who are tuning in are interested in connecting with you and learning more about you, is there a social media handle or website you can share with us today?
Yes, there is. You can go to www.healwithkyonnafbrown.com. So again, that's healwithkyonnafbrown.com. And on social media platforms, you can find me at The Forgiveness Expert or Kyonna F. Brown.
Excellent, excellent. So you guys can definitely connect with Kyonna on your social media handles of your choice and really get some food for thought around forgiveness. Kyonna, I gotta say, I had a moment to check out one of your in the middle praise videos, and it really was spot on. It literally just when you talk about divine timing and miracles, this one really spoke to me. You were touching on miracles and the importance of really listening to God to really have your prayers answered, etc. And so, Kyonna, during, as we both know, during transitional seasons such as grief or downtime, like what you mentioned, it can be hard for a lot of people to see miracles. And so, how can maybe individuals be more open to the many miracles while in that season of downtime or lockdown, per se, that are unfolding still in their life?
Wow. So, the first thing, and I think the strongest thing that you can do is you have to believe. If you do not believe, then I don't care what you want to manifest, what you want to happen, it's not going to happen. A lot of people have asked me, how do you do this and how do you do that? Well, I have this thing called unshakable faith. And that unshakable faith comes from a belief that is rooted down deep inside of me. So I don't care what you say, how you say it. I believe that my God is going to provide no matter what. So having a faith in that belief, and sometimes even what you have faith in, right? You have to realize the object of your faith. So if we have faith in something that doesn't produce anything, then what are you going to get? Nothing. But if you have a faith that the object is the all-knowing God, the miraculous, just knowing who he is, what he's done. Just going back to the creation of the earth. Like, how many people are going out here and say, oh, I'm just going to point and then that's going to be, and so being able to have the belief in the miracle and to know who is the miracle maker is important, right? We sometimes look at people and put them up on a pedestal above, where they are, where they're supposed to be, and we're expecting a miracle from them. But again, that goes back to the object of your faith. So, what is the object of the belief that you have and the miracle that you want to transpire? And so, even having or looking for the miracle, whether it be in a situation with a loved one, your finances, a job, or anything like that, still also knowing that in that the miracle is not just because you pray hard for it. The miracle is not just because you want it really, really bad, but the miracle has to serve a purpose, right? And so knowing that if whatever the miracle is that you want to happen, if it doesn't happen, then you have to be okay with knowing that that was not for that season, or you weren't purposed for that, or that just was not where God was going with the direction of whatever the situation is in your life. So, one, believing, two, having the faith, and three, understanding that the miracle has to have a purpose.
I love one, Kyonna, about how intentional you were really hit on with this, because let's be honest, when we ask for something, not all the time our intentions align with said miracle. And I think that's another reason why, whatever you believe in, God, the universe, source, the gavel gets put down of a no, because you're not ready to receive that. right? And your intentions are not aligned with how that miracle should unfold.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Kyonna, for our listeners too, I gotta touch on this. I mean, in these seasons of transition, right? Grief stems up from loss of friends that flake off because we're elevating up, like what you mentioned, making that conscious decision to stop working on Saturdays where you're able to be more present for your family and leisure time, right? And so in these moments, right, how would you say, Kyonna, that grief plays a role in individuals being unable to forgive?
Mm. Wow, that's a loaded question. So, wow. Just looking at how you are able to heal, right? There are many, many layers, right? So first, you have to reveal, then you release, and then you regain your strength, right? And in that 3-step module, that's what you have to go through in the midst of letting go. And so you have to go through those processes in grief as well, because you have to say, hey, yeah, you're really grieving the fact that this person is no longer my friend, or you're grieving the fact that you got fired and you no longer are employed there, and so once you have that realization with what is going on in your life at that time, which is having a realization of knowing what's going on around you, then you have to get into the space of releasing it, right? Releasing those emotions. And so that can be journaling, that can be going to a therapist, that can be talking to one of your friends who is a sounding board, somebody who has credible credible advice, not your yes man or your yes woman, right? Somebody is going to give it to you real, right? So, and then after you do that, then you have to regain your strength in that area. Yes, those things are gone, but as you said, grief opens up another window. And so now it's time for you to go through that window. And so while you're regaining your strength and going through that window, you can find out new things about yourself. The thing that I love most about us, that we are evolving people, right? Just because something has happened, it doesn't have to stunt our growth. But when we stay in grief or when we stay in sorrow, that does stunt our growth. It stops us from growing. And so just knowing that if we go through these steps and we go through that window, that we're evolving, we're growing, and we're getting to see the new version of ourselves. Like, there's an amazing thing that we can recreate. You can recreate every day, and not even just every day. Like, this makes me excited. Like, you can I can start recreating after this interview. I can decide that, what, I am going to be better in this area, or I'm going to take the time to do this, and I am recreating myself in that area. And so as you go through that window, that new cycle of life, you're able to recreate, and you don't have to stay in that same place anymore. So, and then get excited about that, right? That's, forgiveness too. I get excited because there's new things on the other side of that hurt and that pain. There are new things when you release the chains, right? Get out of bondage and go and see what's on the other side. As you recreate, find out what's new, find out who you could be. God placed something in my spirit the other day to kind of create a sermon around, closing the gap, or getting from one bridge to the next bridge, the bridge of who you think you are to the bridge, crossing that bridge to who God has really created you to be, right? And so if we're staying stuck in that place, we're on one end of the bridge. We got to bridge that gap, how we felt to what God has created us to be. He said God has created us to be the lender, not the borrower, above, not below, the head and not the tail. If we're supposed to be all of these things, then where we're standing at, or where we're stationed at, and we don't want to move from, we will never be able to advance. We will never be able to grow. We will never be able to evolve. We will never be able to recreate if we stay there. So just learning that, I think is one of the greatest tools that we can take, that even in the grief, you can grow. Even in the grief, you can become stronger. You can be different. And there's a motivation behind it. Just looking where you were and say, hey, I don't want to be there anymore. I don't want to feel that anymore. And making the conscious decision to change today.
You know, I gotta really go back to what you mentioned about releasing, right? I think that's the essence of grief, right? Is to release the ideologies, the expectations, right? Like when you made that decision to stop working Saturdays, that expectation that your customers know that you're going to be there every Saturday, you're like, I got to let this go. I'm working myself to death where I'm about to look like a Slim Jim tomorrow. I mean, and I don't want to look like that with my son, with my husband. I want to be able to enjoy life with them and be fully present. And I think grief gives us that platform of opportunity, if we're open to seeing it, to letting go of a lot of those things, that baggage, right? It's baggage from the way we grow up, you know, the ideologies and things that were spoon fed from primary school, the different adults in our lives. We're able to release those and really, in my opinion, come into the transformative being who we're supposed to be, if we're open to it. You know, it's that process of unlearning old behaviors, old expectations, old ideologies, old ways of doing things, to transitioning into a new learning environment of adapting the student for life module of your life.
Yeah.
And I think so many of us continue to be a prisoner because that loss of something that potentially could have been holding us, stifling us from growth and elevation, is no longer here. But truthfully, grief is a window of opportunity. And I think in our society, we have to really change the way we view it.
Yeah.
Because let's be honest, right, Kyonna, we only talk about grief from the lens of when somebody physically transitions. We don't talk about the grief that an empty nester goes through. We don't talk about the grief that comes from a relationship, a friendship, a sisterhood, that job ending, you know, and even for some people, they grieve the life that they never had growing up. So there's so many different avenues of grief, but within that boat of grief, there's a way to find grace.
Yes. Yes, it is. Well said.
And so we're going to take another quick break right here on Group Portia. Everybody stick with us. We will be right back. All right, everybody, welcome back right here on Group Portia. Well, Kyonna, again, I thank you so much for coming back on the show and giving our listeners so much wisdom, food for thought, and a new perspective on how to take any season of transition within our lives and find a way to find grace, find a way to still live life to the fullest and elevate. And Kyonna, for our listeners, again, if they want to connect with you and learn more about you, is there a website or social media handle you can share with us today?
Yes, you can go to www.healwithkyonnafbrown.com. You spell my name Kyonna, F as in Frank, Brown is in the color.com. On social media platforms, you can find me there. It's Kyonna F. Brown or The Forgiveness Expert. And I also have a group called Forgiveness Nation on Facebook. You can find that as well. And if you go to YouTube, you can look up Forgiveness Nation Media. And that's where I have a lot of healing with the healing incubator, as well as in the middle praise and some short films that I've done as well.
Yes, Kyonna, you definitely are a Jacqueline of many trades and talents. Kyonna, I gotta ask this. I mean, you wear, as I mentioned, so many different roles. I mean, you're a wife, mother, serial entrepreneur, author, podcaster, film director, producer. How do you, Kyonna, find that balance, right, between your passion of overgiving, helping people, and prioritizing your mental well-being?
Wow. It's a word that I had to learn, and that I had to tell myself quite often. It's in the English language and some other languages as well, and it's simply spelled N-O. And so I had to learn to tell myself no. And what do I mean no? So I can literally say I am not going to do something. And then because I have my hands in the pot so much, I can't sometimes just sit there and do nothing. And so while I'm sitting there doing nothing, my brain starts to go and it's like, well, you can be doing this, you can be doing that. And I said, no, Kyonna, you can be doing this, absolutely nothing, because this is what's going to help you keep your sanity. And so also, one of the things that I've started to do on Friday nights with my son is have movie night. And so every Friday, like, go to our favorite place or whatever we want to eat for that particular night, and we're just going to enjoy each other. And that's a part of saying no, because I'm saying no to the extracurricular things. I'm saying no to the phone calls. I'm saying no to writing that next chapter. I'm saying no to writing that next scene, because at the end of the day, if I don't say no, I will have given up too many yeses. And before I looked up, then all of my life will be gone because I just continued to say yes. So that is how I've learned to navigate through life, where I have a peace of mind, to say no, not today.
Right. Not today. Nuh-uh. No means next opportunity. It's not a bad thing. It's a complete sentence all in itself. And so, Kyonna, how does you being a mother, right, and you're able to have that flexibility with your son and him seeing you as an example, right? His mom doing all these great things in several different areas, right? How do you think that also shapes him and his thought pattern for success in the coming years when he walks across the high school stage off to whatever endeavors he wants to do? How do you think you paving that way and him seeing you take care of yourself really instills that same amount of respect within him?
Well, I think that it opens up the door of opportunity for him, because he's able to see all of the things that not just I do, but that his dad does, all the things that we acquire from what we do. And that allows him to not have a limited mindset. He said to me the other day, he said, Mom, when I get older, I want to work at the shop. I said, well, you can work at the shop. But by the time, that happens, you might be in a position where the shop will be yours. And so I've had to make some transitions over the past 10 years. So at one point I did have a doggy daycare. And so that didn't work out the way that I expected it to. And so I had to shift. But he saw all of that. And so in the conversation, he said, well, when it becomes mine, I am going to bring back the doggy daycare because of X, Y, and Z. And it's like he has so much vision. He's already told me about his wife and his children. And, and my husband just got this car, and he's planning for this car to be his when he turns 16. This is going to be mine. Like, he has like this master plan for everything. Like, his little brain just goes. And I love that he's not limited by what he sees in his environment, meaning outside of the home. But he's encouraged to know that he can do anything. And I always let him know you can do whatever you want to do, right? You have the power. Nothing can limit you. The only thing that can limit yourself is you. And so if you have a desire to do something, then you can go ahead and do it. So he, is doing Taekwondo, and he wants to get into some other sport. And even he lets me know, he says, Mom, I think I want to take a break. And I'm like, this 10-year-old is telling me, he said, yeah, but I don't want to take a long break, just a short break, because he realizes that he needs some time off, that he wants to regroup and kind of have a rest period. A lot of us adults don't even do that. We want to say we want to do X, Y, and Z, but there's no time off. This little dude said, no, I think I want to take about a week off. I said, okay, we'll see about that. But just showing him that, the limit is higher than the sky, and whatever you want to achieve. And I don't hide anything from him. I've let him know, the background that I come from. And when he goes with me, because he does go with me sometimes to speaking events or interviews and, things like that. So he gets to see all of that. He gets to see me share, really, really sensitive things. And so I even shared something sensitive with him today. And he says, I can handle that. I said, oh, okay, you can handle that. Okay, all right. One of my friends was listening in on the conversation, and she said, he is such a mature little boy. But partially, I think, is because he's the only child. So he thinks he's kind of grown folk. But, he's really mature for his age and in that area, some of the conversations that we have. So just showing him that anything is possible, no matter where you come from.
And kudos to you and your husband, Kyonna, for being so transparent, right? Because how many of our parents growing up were not as transparent, and having that open dialogue and giving our kids the playing field to pick and choose. I mean, he flat out told you, hey, Ma, I need a break. I need to go on vacation. Like, how many kids are aware, for one, aware enough, to privileged and feel comfortable to even share that with their parent? Like, hey, Ma, I need a break. I'm tired. I got all this homework. I'm tired of drinking all this milk in school and whatever else that they're doing, right? And just you being that open and transparent and vulnerable role model that you are, kudos to both you and your husband for that. Because I hope that more parents are able to adopt a similar path of transparency to really encourage our kids and not discourage them from asking questions. It keeps that curiosity wheel going in their life. And I mean, like you said, he's got all these great plans, and kudos to him for being that curious child and not allowing that inner curiosity to die from being discouraged. So kudos to both you and your husband again, Kyonna. Kyonna, we are going to be wrapping up here soon, and I am just so thankful that you came back on to share with our listeners so much. And again, I thank you. Kyonna, I always love to save this question for last. You've left us with so much food for thought, words of wisdom, inspiration, and ways of thinking for people to really shift their mindset. Kyonna, what words of inspiration can you leave with our listeners today, whether they are new on their grief journey and they want to do things different, or if it's someone in the forgiveness boat and they want to really use that for their own healing and growth? What words of inspiration, Kyonna, can you leave with our listeners today?
Wow. Here's a quote that I always say. It's my own personal quote, that today is your stepping stone for greater tomorrow. So no matter where you are in this moment, this season of life, whether you are transitioning through grief, because we know that we evolve, so we're going to, move from one space to the next, or whether you're transitioning in another area of grief, from work or relationship or anything, just knowing that no matter where you are today in your thoughts, that if you continue to change your thought, guess what? Your heart is going to line up with that. And eventually you'll start to see the difference and the change in your life. So take it one day at a time, one step at a time. And remember that you are purposed for this life. You're still here. You still have breath. That means that there's still great work for you.
Oh, 100%, Kyonna. I mean, I think that what we go through in life, we're able to find a way to grow through it, right? You know, I always tell people the comfort zone is equivalent to planting a seed in a drought. A seed in a drought won't grow. Same thing like when we're in the grief process. Grief is a process, but it's not permanent. It doesn't hold permanence unless we let it. And so really taking that perspective that grief is more of a benefit in our life instead of a deficit. We can choose to continue to be victims of our circumstance or find a way to become victorious as we are resilient creatures. And like you said, we are destined for greatness. Well, everybody, that was your forgiveness expert herself, Miss Kyonna F. Brown, that you heard from. And that concludes another episode of Groove with Portia, everybody. Thanks for listening and have a good evening.